Hello and welcome to Services Reporter's Architect Designer of the Week. Our architect this week is one of the founding members and partner of Design Forum International, New Delhi. The seed for Design Forum International was sown by three architects, Anand Sharma, Anuj Tabatia, and Goonmeet Singh Chauhan, all from IIT Kharagpur, in the year 1995. It was then called Tabatia, Chauhan, and Sharma Architects, later rechristened as Design Forum International in the year 2003. With projects spanning across 17 states and a vibrant team of over 100 professionals, today Design Forum International, or DFI as it is called, has a portfolio of 11 million square feet of mixed use and retail, 60 million square feet of group housing, 3,000 acres of master planning, and 8.5 million square feet of office and IT parks. DLF, Airports Authority of India, Ansals, Omex, NBCC, Purvankara, JP, Eldeco are some of the among the list of esteemed clients of Design Forum International. Some of the projects also include the new courts complex of the Delhi High Court, Guwahati International Airport, Select City Walk, New Delhi's GD Goenka Public School, Michael Schumacher, World Tower Gurgaon, and many more. As you know, every week Surfaces Reporter comes up with a story and work of one architect or designer. Today we have architect Goonmeet Singh Chauhan, one of the founding partners of DFI. He's an architect, urbanist, futurist, and author of Invertonomics. Surfaces Reporter did cover this book in one of our headlines of the week. Invertonomics is about 8 ideas to transform India. He has a strong urge to change what is not right. He says desirable social change can be brought about by effective use of technology and involvement of the private sector, while at the same time generate revenues for the government. Well, his upcoming book, Betterment of Civic Life, is a response to that change. Today, Madhurima Chowdhury, Executive Editor of Surfaces Reporter, is in conversation with architect Goonmeet Singh Chauhan. There is definitely a lot of inspiration for the architects who wish to be agents of change and contribute to the society. Get to know the story and initiatives by Goonmeet Singh Chauhan only on Surfaces Reporter magazine. First of all, tell us a little bit about your brief journey as an architect.
My journey to becoming an architect began by accident, really. And while I think there is divine hand in it, it wasn't a conscious choice. And I was still unsure whether I wanted to be an architect after sort of 2 years of studying it. And when I had to do a renovation assignment in my own house, and my mom felt that after 2 years I should be able to handle it. And there was so much learning in that process, and the joy of seeing it transform in front of your own eyes. That is when I really felt in love with the power of transformation and how one can actually voice one's ideas and see them physically. From that day on, whether it was designing a Unitarian shrine, I remember that was the first project we got when I came back after vacation, and researching on it and what it would be to design a shrine for all faiths, to the form. I felt architecture was just one beautiful tool to translate thoughts into reality. And then, while we were still studying with three partners, we started transforming restaurants within the campus that were not doing well. So something as small as one restaurant having a small counter with too many people crowding, and we said, why don't you replace this with a 30-foot long counter and separate your cash and delivery? And this is early 90s, before India had seen fast food. chains operate. And we found that that guy started to do well. We did family restaurants with chefs in the open and bonfires. And so we also tasted that architecture can actually influence businesses and the power to transform the whole existence. I mean, how things thrive. Very often we look at architecture as static building, but it's actually more, it's a container for life to thrive. So if the architect can understand eventually what is going to happen in it as a living organism that building supports so much, that is when real sort of values added by an architect. And then because we had tasted these early sort of successes, we came out and the three of us started this practice 7 days out of our convocation. And there were initial struggles getting people to trust you with their projects, mostly residential projects to begin with, and renovations. And then when we sort of were able to deliver, I felt we brought in a certain process orientation to the delivery in a very disorganized industry. We were able to do in the beginning 20 houses at a time to maybe even 100 houses at one point. So it was a very well-oiled, process-driven organization. And at that time, I thought our style of architecture was still quite eclectic. And as you grew, as you traveled, as you read more, you sort of worked towards your own style. And then we did a lot of architectural design competitions. And initially, we thought it was all rigged, and but we did taste success. So we got a project like Select City Walk in 2003, part of a design competition. And also the real estate environment and the industry was growing. And therefore we sort of grew with it. And I think our growth was fueled purely by winning competitions and then delivering. And then I remember beginning to travel because we are homegrown Indian Army officer kids. Internet wasn't so popular or available in our time, so the exposures were very limited to the books that we got to read. So travel was something that really allowed me to see works of other masters and evaluate and think. And I think sometime around 2010, I felt that I enjoy public architecture more than doing homes for individual families. Although I still do that off and on, but I really enjoy doing public architecture, like institutions. And we've every 2 years added one or two typologies to our practice. So we went from doing only homes to doing retail, to doing condominium complexes, to doing townships. And then we added educational institutions, universities. Of late, we've added airports, courts, district courts, railway stations. And very recently now we've added road redesign to our portfolio, and also walkability projects of city infrastructure where we're trying to improve the ability for people to cycle and walk in their cities. So that has been the journey of evolution. Quite a humble journey, but enjoying it.
If you would like to tell me a little bit about your experience designing the Select City Walk.
Select City Walk is a pioneering project in many ways. For one, it was the largest real estate development in those days. And client was very keen, although they were not real estate developers themselves, that they should establish a new benchmark and create a successful retail center that would become the most preferred destination for people to come and shop. So the definition was very, very clear right from the beginning of the management that they wanted it to be the most preferred shopping center. So, even before we got to designing, we actually researched the most successful shopping centers in India, and there were few in those days. And then we went to Singapore, we went to Malaysia, we went to Jakarta, to Dubai, and we sort of did our research for almost a year, for almost a month and a half, as to what goes into making a successful shopping center. And even before that, the selection of the architect, they had shortlisted 9 architects, and we were not even on the list. Somehow we managed to smuggle ourselves into that list, and we were given 1 week to present. And while most of our competition had brought their credentials to show, we had worked, I think, 72 hours or more at a stretch to actually propose a design with a walkthrough. And in those days, walkthroughs were still new. And to actually showcase to them how we can create a haven for women, because we felt that women contribute maximum to shopping. And in terms of convenience of parking, safety, ease of visibility within the movements, we are able to see signages across floors. So we were able to capture the whole sort of success formula based on case studies that we were able to do in those 10 days. And we were doing 2 or 3 shopping centers in Gurgaon at that time, which were far smaller. Then we were shortlisted, and 2 architects were shortlisted, and both Indian firms. And we were told that they wanted an international partner to be brought on board because we were too nascent, especially us. The other firm was much bigger. We teamed up with DP Architects and Meinhardt Corporation for engineering and DP Architects for design. And that is how a collaborative team was created about a month and a half into the project. Then began the whole research process to identify what would it take to deliver a successful project. And I also realized, working with DP, working with Meinhardt, what it meant to collaborate. I think architects tend to be very egoistic, and great retail centers are not designed in isolation. By architects, you need to be in conversation with retail specialists. You need to really take on the concerns of the retailers and the shoppers. And out of that would emerge the first sort of blueprint. And then that gets modified many number of times before you are actually able to produce the final designs. And in this, we had a team of almost 9 designers, including landscape architects who played a very vital role in creating a beautiful plaza and a more outdoorsy shopping experience, including people who designed the skylight, because we felt we wanted the soft sunlight to come into the shopping center. So while it was an air-conditioned space, it held the lightness of an outdoor space. And many people come and say that we feel de-stressed while shopping there. We feel elevated when we shop there. What is it? And I think the fact that you can see the sky from within in many places, that you can see greenery, the fact that the quality of light inside is so beautiful, these are intangibles, which actually affect the appeal. Of course, the choice of brands and providing for the shopping, for the retailers, which is not something that an architect does, which is something that the management of the shopping center did. And the management, including their retailing team, were exceptional.
The importance of collaboration and partnerships in architecture and design.
We have collaborated with international architects, international interior designers, as well as architects and interior designers within the country, and also with landscape architects. And I find very often when you're doing, let's say, a condominium project, the landscape architect has a lot to offer in terms of how you should lay out your towers so that they don't block the sun for the garden? And how should the ramps be placed so that they are convenient and the traffic flows well? And how can we create a vehicle-free campus which experientially is a lot more green? So I have found in my projects that the more you listen, entrance volumes need to be modulated, or the location of the lift versus the staircase, and choices of materials, quality of light, fluidity of space, transparency of vision. And even artists, we did a cultural complex where the client was so evolved that he brought in a panel of 7, I would say, evolved citizens, some of whom were filmmakers and some of whom were artists. And one of the artists said, it's all okay. You've been able to functionally provide for everything. You've also brought in elements of local heritage, choice of materials, etc. But as an artist, I find your composition is too balanced, and it's too sort of static. And I would imagine that we would want to break away from that and present a more dynamic view of Indian culture. So if you see a dancer, it's a very dynamic expression. Can you do something about it? Now you don't have to respond to it. You don't have to say no, 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 but we have issues with this and that. And I found that almost we were at the tendering stage at that point, but that message hit me so hard that we turned the roof completely. And now that roof, which is a very dynamic roof, will actually be an iconic element on the skyline. So the more we collaborate, and you don't have to absorb everything, there'll be noise also in the suggestions that you receive. But the more open you are to your peers, the more enriched your designs shall become. And even engineers play a very, very vital role. And some of our engineers are actually well traveled and very bright. I have an MEP engineer, Vikramjit Kupeja, who is my biggest critic. He gives me great suggestions when I send the designs to him. Even my structural consultants, Mr. Ajay Sani, who pretty much, he's a professor himself and taught me a lot on structures, comes up with brilliant ideas about how we can playfully resolve the structure rather than in the most conservative manner. So I think any sensitive architect is collaborative. Even with craftsmen, you have to be collaborative because it touches is able to add his fragrance to.
So, about a little bit of the book, what is it about and the 8 ideas, and is there any aspect you feel must have changed due to the pandemic?
Into economic opportunities. It's published by HarperCollins, and basically it is a book about solving problems of India, and it has ideas which can actually be implemented in any developing country across the world. So we've solved real problems like honking, like air pollution in our cities, the poor compliance of traffic norms. How do we create a city that is walkable and safe for women? How do we ensure that garbage management in our cities is done scientifically? And the book also talks a lot about citizen participation, and not in a manner that is sort of models backed by technology can allow greater citizenship participation. So what we are doing is we are saying that money is a great tool to alter individual behavior for collective good. So if you know that most of the time individual behavior is a function of convenience. We all know that it's good to wake up early and exercise and eat in moderation, but what we do is just the opposite because it's more convenient. So human behavior is more convenient to chuck litter than to throw it in the bins. You just chuck it on the roadside. So if we know that people are going to respond to convenience, the counter to that is that you attach an incentive or a disincentive. So one is that we're using money. Second is we're using real-time technologies. And real-time technology is available today, and the pandemic has shown us how real-time technology penetration is allowing people to work from home. So, technology penetration, which people used to wonder whether it's there in the villages, whether all those questions are now no longer asked. So, for example, every time you honk, you would be charged a rupee. It's not important what technology would be used, but what is important is that at the end of the week, you will get a bill on your mobile phone which will say that you are in the top 10% of the honkies in your colony, and your fine is 500 rupees. So most likely you're going to sit up and take notice. Oh, ye kaise ho gaya? And you will also not have an excuse because you are in the top 10%. So there are 90% people living in the same area as you who are performing better than you, or that you are the least honking in your area, least 2%, and Airtel wants to offer you a discount on the telephone bill because you are a positive citizen. So, this kind of creates a citizen bhagidari where positive compliance is rewarded instantly and individually, while negative compliance is disincentivized, and through a very individual conversation you are told that Cham, you need to improve. It could even say we find that you honk a very excessive rate, the maximum garbage in your colony or the least. So the whole fact that today there is no way to measure individual behavior versus this would replace it with a new ecosystem where you would know where you stand versus your peers. And it's not going to be pasted on the notice board for shaming you. It's going to be told to you individually on your phone. So there is no sense of being outraged. And equally, you will be told how well you are segregating. So, Mr. Khanna, your segregation accuracy is 80%, and the median accuracy in your area is 70%. And therefore, we'd like to congratulate you for being better than the median. And equally, we find that you generate a lot more biodegradable waste than others. You might consider composting locally. It's a much better way of managing, and you'll be able to save cost on your manure in the garden. So, an intelligent system which is able to advise people and citizens on how they can be better citizens and therefore act individually in the interest of collective good. And that is the bedrock of all the solutions in this book. In addition to generating a lot of money, we've shown that even at excellent compliance rates, honking will still generate close to 5 to 6,000 crores annually, and in the beginning, 50 to 60,000 crores. Air pollution will create roughly 90,000 crores annually for the governments. And therefore, it will also provide a lot of impetus financially, because you see, whenever you have to solve a problem, if you look at climate change, what is it that people sitting at the top do? They bring focus onto an issue. They allot funds towards a problem. They bring in new legislations. They bring in institutional framework to support. They bring about some changes in the ecosystem. They bring about changes in some benchmarks that people have to live up to. So we're using similar approach. Bringing in the citizen is the new aspect. Bringing in a new way to connect citizens and gauge their performance individually basis their peers is a new aspect. And that will be communicated using technology on an individual basis. The book has found great response from government as well as readers. And it's not a very technical book. A class 10 student can read and understand. You really don't need to understand economics. It's very simple arithmetic. And that too, you don't have to get into arithmetic. If you understand the logic, that is good enough. And then the book takes on very, very deep issues like women empowerment and how can we break the patriarchal construct of society in terms of inheritance and how women's inheritance rights need to be protected, starting from even the maiden name, you know. And if you look at the Indian heritage, most people were known by their mother's name. So you were Kunti Putra, you know, and the lineage was your surname. So you were Suryavanshi, but you were Kunti Putra. So you're always known by your mother and your lineage. But now, somewhere in that whole passage of time, the mother's name has disappeared. So a simple legislation can say that all school forms henceforth will have the name of the mother and the father. And what would it take to add one more suffix to the name? But this whole thing that I must have a boy child, I must, because my lineage must continue. And even brothers denying their sisters, even in India, you'd be amazed that only 20% of women today, even in urban India, actually get their fair share of inheritance. So how can we affect those? And I've spun an economic model around it. So it's very interesting that how social attitudes can be changed if you can spin economic models, of course, backed by new legislation. And we have looked at farmer distress. And today, again, this issue has become centerpiece. So if anybody is interested in knowing, and creating their position around this farm bill, I mean, all you need to do is pick up Invertonomics and it will tell you in a very sort of brief way how it should be done and how it should not be done. But what is clear is that we can never, never neglect the farmer. And our farmers have been ignored for too long. So any nation building effort has to look at farmers, because what happens is when your villages become decadent, then people come running to cities looking for jobs. And these are people who have missed their childhood opportunities of learning. They come here and live in slums. Then, as architects, we worry about density, we worry about all the other things which are associated with it. So, if an architect wants to contribute to nation building, it is not just about affordable housing. Yes, we do need affordable housing, and we're doing a lot of that. But we have to create empowered, prosperous villages where my village folk can find good education for their children, great health care for themselves, good job opportunities, and take away this push out of the village into the city. And that will help our cities recover and heal. And so it is in the interest of both that we have, for us to have great cities, we need to have even greater villages. So this is the whole sort of construct of that book, Invertonomics. That is the key. The farm sector is the engine of the rural economy. For what we pay 10, he gets paid 1. So even if he was to get 2 or 3, the whole village economy will change. I mean, the reason India was called Sone ki Chidiya is not just because of our handicraft, it is also because of the rich farming community that we had. So, post the Industrial Revolution and post the colonial era subjugating the farmers, and for some silly reason, not that our politicians have done much. So, but this book hopes to change and make headway into that, so that this girl might still come to the village, from the village to the city, but not to be a maid. Let her come to be a nurse or a doctor or an engineer or an artist or a painter, not out of compulsion, but out of choice.
So, do we see any kind of progress on this at the moment for any of the ideas that you have suggested so far?
So, two ideas have found great response. One is around walkability and cyclability in our cities. So, we made a proper report and submitted to the union government with a clear sort of dream which said, can we make Delhi the most walkable and cyclable city in India? So, as is normal, the people said, well, it's great to have an idea, but do you have an action plan? So we took a month and we actually presented an action plan, and the project is called Delhi Cycle Walk. It is a project which is now already seeing implementation. The government has given full backing to this project, and it went through a whole process of almost 18 months of evaluation at multiple levels, and finally significant money was allotted for the project and tenders have been awarded. Work has begun on the first phase. So the entire project is going to be a 200-kilometer dedicated corridor only for cycling and walking. And this is going to link the urban villages of Delhi to the industrial areas. It's going to link residential colonies to schools, educational institutions, business districts, health districts. So almost 70% of Delhi will be linked through this dedicated cycling and walking corridor that will allow you to actually cycle from your home to your university. So Delhi University, North Campus, South Campus, JNU, Qutub Institutional Area, Jamia Millia, Majidia, IIT Delhi, all of them are now going to be connected to this. So if you're living, let's say, 15 kilometers or even 20 kilometers away as a student, you no longer have to worry about taking a car. You can just cycle there. And if you're living 3 to 5 kilometers, you can walk. And we're looking at a shaded walkway, mostly shaded by trees. And
Exactly,
we
that
look,
was my
yeah,
question because of the climate in Delhi. That
yeah.
was my question about having a cycle corridor is wonderful, but what about the weather conditions?
This corridor is mostly going through the urban greens of Delhi, about 80%. And the urban greens, many areas we have trees, so we're going to take this path under the canopy of trees, and we're not touching any of those trees. In fact, we are adding almost 5 times more trees along the passage and putting evergreen trees, even flowering trees. So it's going to be not just inexpensive, so you're not going to just save money, it's going to be healthy. It's going to take 1 million cars out of the system and therefore help pollution. It's also going to be very aesthetic in a way where you can romantically enjoy your city. So we found that this 200 kilometers is going to touch 13 lakes. And if you ask anybody in Delhi, do you know about the lakes of Delhi? They say, huh? Do we have lakes? So now we are reviving 13 lakes, and you could be ambling along a beautiful lake while going on to your university or to your hospital as a worker in the morning. Then it's touching so many monuments like Mehrauli, Adilabad, Tughlakabad, Sultangadi, Satpura, and each of these is going to see an architectural manifestation in the landscape that we are going to create along this path. So we are also looking at creating ecotourism around this. We're also going to look at creating heritage tourism. So, and even if you're not formally doing either of these, you're just going from your home to your place of work, this is what you will experience. So a lot of spin-offs also that are emerging. So that's one project. The other one is around education. So the chapter on equity and how we can implement equity focuses a lot on education for the underprivileged child, children of construction workers, children who are scavenging, rummaging through garbage heaps, children who are currently begging on street lights. What happens to the future of these children? And they are the citizens of the future, however small we might think the number is. Delhi has 20,000 such children. It's staggering, the number. And unless we start the cleanup right at the bottom, what is the citizenship going to be 15 years down the line? It's going to be these children. So we said, well, let's find a way to transform their lives, empower their lives. And out of that was born a concept called WISE, World Initiative for Service and Education. And in the book, this idea was read by an industrialist who said, well, let's not wait for the government, let's just start on our own. Well, we said, well, it's going to be expensive, 20, 30,000 children. So, and in fact, the book talks about 1 million children across India. He said, well, let's begin. So the first project has now begun. We have 22 children in the residential school. These are children of construction workers, of roadside laborers and malis. Many of them are first generation learners. So the first school has opened up in Coorg, and the second school is now opening up in Jammu. And then we presented this idea to the Delhi government, which has taken it up in a real seriousness and allocated again significant funds. And when I say significant, it runs into hundreds of crores. And we have put together a very robust model on how to create this residential school to transform the lives of these street urchins. And it's called the Sujivan Shiksha Ghar. And Sujivan Shiksha Ghar is going to actually allow these children to blossom into positive, responsible citizens of India. And the tagline is Ek Swachh Samriddh Khushal Jeevan Ki Aur. That is the tagline, and that is what we hope to implement. And the Delhi government is taking it up very, very seriously. We should see work start on the first school in the next 12 months.
How can architects connect with the majority 90% as opposed to the 10% that most architects cater to?
See, fundamentally, when you look at the profession of doctors, all of us hold them in very high regard. And very clearly, if there is a health crisis in the country, you know that each and every doctor, and in some cases, people who have retired away, a friend of mine, she posted that her 78-year-old father, who had long retired, again took it up and started seeing patients, and he contracted COVID, and in fact, he passed away. But all those risks did not prevent him from courageously coming forward and serving the community and the country, because all these doctors are truly committed, most. When it comes to architecture, the whole notion is not really about paying back to society. It's more about A, self-fulfillment, and B, it is about great creative design, and C, it is about serving the rich and wealthy who can afford to pay for it. But then there are others who have gone through that initial phase where their personal fulfillments, have been met. And you can each set your own bar, but yes, it's perfectly fine to first work for yourself and strengthen and fulfill your childhood dreams. But thereafter, we must recognize that the society refers to us as professionals. And a society is only as strong as its professionals, and it gives you that izzat because it does expect that you would contribute your bit. So I think it's very, very important that each of us plays out a role to give some of our time to those who might not be able to afford our services. Many doctors contribute by doing half a day of no cost or low cost fee. Some spend one day. So I think my message to architects would be that devote some of your time, whether it is sometime every week, or it's sometime every day, or it's sometime every month, and see and ask yourself that am I able to contribute to those who are not directly paying for my service. And I think if we approach it with that, you'll find not just a lot of fulfillment, you'll also find great insights and learning. And I think that would be my message to the community. And many, honestly, are doing. It's not as if people are, many are.
How profitability can be used as a uh, tool to actually make things more easily acceptable to the citizens.
So, if you look at toilets, for example, we did a base calculation that if we were to provide adequate toilets, public toilets for our citizens in urban India, we require something like 14 lakh crores. And clearly, that kind of capital will never be available, not in the next 50 years. Our defense budget is 4 lakh crores. And so 14 lakh crores would be 3.5 times that number. And in the last 7 years, with the entire backing of the most of the highest office, we've been able to spend 70,000 crores on Swachh Bharat. But yet the problem of sanitation needs to be solved. I mean, we need to be able to provide clean and dry toilets to our citizens. So the book imagines an institution called the Toilets Corporation of India. And what we would do is the Toilets Corporation of India would bundle toilets with coffee shops and other retail facilities and take prime retail from prime space from all municipalities and work in conjunction with them to create these cafe come loos or retail come loos in a manner where the loo itself is a paid facility and therefore it would pay for its operational expenses. However, the capital needed for creating a clean and dry toilet would come from the retail. And we've imagined that if we were to do it through an ecosystem and a nice institutional framework, Toilets Corporation of India could end up having a retail footprint of 15 to 20 lakh crore square feet. And therefore, it could become the single largest retail space owner in the country. And the monies for that would be used for funding this project. And it doesn't have to be done in one go. You do it in a cellular manner, 100 toilets at a time per city. And in a very simple way, one is able to solve a problem in a self-sustained manner. And each toilet is, you're talking about 25 lakhs to 1 crore. So it's not as if at an individual location that kind of retail attraction would not be available. So the moment you are able to create a financial blueprint for a project, then you implement the architectural vision and the two resonate, and that gives you a successful model that is scalable, replicable, and it will thrive. And people will also find it useful. I mean, if a toilet is made and it's not clean, you and I are not going to use it. Then, however, if it's a toilet that's made well, it's kept clean, it's odorless because there is a coffee shop next to it, or a florist, or an ice cream parlor, or a bank, or an ATM, then you're more likely to use it, and government's resources are also not depleted. So in that way, I feel that financial prudence has to be built into any public initiative. This is super critical.
You have also Invertonomics Foundation of India created that foundation as well. So what are the objectives of the foundation and what are the current projects you're working on through that?
So after the book was written, we felt that we cannot just leave it as a submission to the civil society and to the nation that here are the ideas, now do what you want. So we said, let's create a foundation of enthused, like-minded professionals who would actually take these ideas and make sure that they're implemented in the original form or in a reconditioned form that is appropriate to the context. So the foundation currently has 12 very, very eminent, enthused civil citizens from different streams, bankers, engineers, doctors, entrepreneurs. And it has three components. The first component is ideation. So we pick a problem and then we ideate on how to solve this. The second component is advocacy, where we take that idea to the government, to the legislators, to civil society, various stakeholders, and say, this is how a problem can be solved, and these are the steps, here is the action plan. The third thing is solutioneering. So very often when you present an action plan also to the government, they'll say, okay, at the macro level, it looks very good, but would you want to leave it at that, or would you want to handhold us? We will give you a nodal officer, we'll give you a team, but handhold them into ensuring that the way you conceived it, it can actually be implemented. And that is called solutioneering, where you engineer a solution. So the foundation is going to do ideation, advocacy, solutioneering, and we've currently worked on the Delhi Cycle Walk project in the foundation, and we're now working on the Sujivan Shiksha Ghar under the same foundation. And now we are taking up the project called 5 Guna Ped, 5 Guna Pani, 5 Guna Naukri. How can we ensure that there is 5 times more clean water available? How can we increase the green cover in our cities to 5 times? And how can we ensure that there are 5 times more jobs? And it also goes on to look at the kind of jobs of the future. You know, we've gone through jobs for civil engineers in our father's age and government employees, and then our generation saw an upsurge of software people, and then there were graphic designers and web designers, and now you'll have jobs for AI. But we need to look in our context and see that in our cities, in Delhi, in Bombay, in Hyderabad, in Lucknow, what are the kind of jobs that would be needed to keep the whole population gainfully employed? So can I create more avenues for artists? Can I create more avenues for designers, for chefs, for musicians? Can I promote tourism in my cities? What should I need to do to train people in the hospitality industry? What do I need to do to have cleaner cities? What kind of clean technology industries need to be incentivized? Are they going to be linear cities and linear corridors of growth? Are they going to be primary uh, occupations, or are they going to be more of tertiary and quaternary? So those are the issues that we are now taking up in the Panch Guna Naukri. And so Delhi is now really going to look at rehashing itself as a tourism capital of India under that report that we are going to present. Tourism, health, and education are the 3 pillars that we are looking at. And under Panch Guna Ped, we are looking at the legislations for afforestation. We're looking at land acquisition for afforestation. So land acquisition for industries is another thing, but land acquisition for afforestation, we're looking at green bonds where planting trees can actually get you additional FAR. And the number of trees would have to be in multiples of thousands and of a certain age. So how we're going to look at digitizing the existence of every tree and health of every tree. So it's a very, very deep dive into how to make the biomass 5 times, not just cut a banyan tree and replace it with an Ashoka or 10 Ashokas. So we are going to look at technology for spectrographic mapping of the biomass of these trees. It's already a 400-page document, and the Invertonomics Foundation is working very hard now to present its report to the union government to replicate across all cities, and how we can look at water, the vegetation, and employment, and how they don't have to be contrary to each other. This whole notion that development is anti-environment is misfounded. So we are questioning that what is a clean environment economy? A clean environment economy has to promote tourism, has to promote hospitality, has to promote arts, has to promote technology. If you go on promoting the old world economy, you are going to be at contrary to the environment. So that is the whole next impetus of the Invertonomics Foundation.
How do you manage your time between work with for a DFI, the other projects that you have, and the Invertonomics Foundation, the work?
I think it's about not being too stressed about the work you do. All of us do a lot of work, but many of us are stressed, and that takes away a lot of our productivity. So I've never worried about failing, just try a lot. I find that because you're not worried about failing, there's no stress, you're light, and you are able to work longer hours. So I do manage to put in 12 to 14 hours of work, and God has been very, very kind. Sometimes I feel it takes a toll on my health, but yet I'm able to jump out of bed at 5:30, and I don't feel tired even at 10 or 11. I have to tell myself time to sleep. So that is at an individual level, and at a collective level, I find that people are very, very helpful if you are clean and clear in your approach. So the Invertonomics Foundation, 90% of the work is not done by me. It's done by the members of the foundation, and they have taken it upon themselves. It's like this is a platform that is allowing each one of them to make their contributions, and we really want this platform to grow. And similarly in DFI, we have people with us who've been with us for 19, 20 years. We say that it's like Hotel California. You cannot leave. You can check in, but you can never leave. I mean, not that we keep people on weed, but we do keep them high on freedom, on self-expression, on the purity of purpose, and people just take the responsibilities that they have very seriously. You don't have to give it to them; they take it, and that frees you up. I mean, I think fundamentally, purity of intent, I would say, in a single line, that is, it makes everything move.
About the current projects that you're working on at DFI, what are some of the projects currently that you are working on or in the process right now?
So, a very exciting project that we're doing is on the Central Vista, and it touches the India Gate hexagon. It's called the Vanijya Bhavan, Department of Commerce, and this is a very fascinating project given the location, and one had to be very conscious of the architectural vocabulary, and there were contrarian views. Some would say no, blend in. Some would say why should we not break away. So what I've chosen is a style which is period architecture. It mimics the architecture of what is known as Lutyens' Delhi in terms of the materiality, the textures, the silhouettes, the scale, the symmetry, and equally the technology that we've used is very, very contemporary. And the building has 128 circular columns all around its envelope, and these are 4 feet in diameter, massive columns. And then beyond these columns is a 4-meter cantilever, like an overarching shade. And then I have glass behind the columns, which is about 1.5 meters recessed. And the glass has stone fins every 1.6 meters. So what you read is a circular colonnade sitting on top of a plinth of 2 floors, and then capped with this hovering Dholpur stone plane. But actually, there is a glass box behind. And so when you're inside the building, you actually see the whole city, and basically you see trees. There's nothing else to see there, luckily. And so while the glass is completely hidden, you miss it. You don't see any aluminum. It reads like a shadow, a void. But from within, the view outside is what a typical glass building allows you. And of course, we have modern lifts and an open office plan, very fluid spaces, large and small meeting rooms, lunch rooms which double up as training halls, open pantries, no attached toilets, even for the senior most people, barring 1 or 2. So, a very democratic sort of government office, high on efficiency. It provides storage space, but equally it doesn't build walls. And everybody has a green view. It also has um, elements of art and sculpture that relate to various periods of Indian commerce. So we were told that Indian commerce did not exist before the Britishers came in and all that about not crossing the seas. But actually, if you dig, we were part of many international trade routes. So, all that has been spun into the art. So when you walk in the garden, it's like a walk in history, and you discover the various facets of the Indian commerce eras. So then one has to be very conscious of the skyline. So we've kept the building height low, well below the tree line, so it doesn't pop out. The alignment of the building has been kept parallel to the Rajpath and Mansingh Marg. It's also designed for night lighting. So 26th January, 2nd October, 15th August, all those days it would really be lit up. But I've stayed away from multicolored systems. We also use motorized blinds so that when the building is lit up, all the blinds are down. You're not seeing the soil ceilings inside. And the landscape is using indigenous trees. It's going to be pretty much vehicle free. So the ramps are placed in such a way that you enter and just go down. And so that is something that I've been spending a lot of time on. It's once in a lifetime opportunity. And to deliver a high quality product in the government system can be quite challenging. Not that they're not supportive, they're very supportive, extremely supportive, I would say. But still, the sheer scale and pace at which the government works, individual attention is not always possible by officers. And therefore, one has to personally go and supervise and ensure that we get real finesse. That public architecture is something which is not been handled well in India in the last 50, 70 years. My objective currently is to restore public architecture to a place of pride. If people should say that it's delivered by the government, it will be solidly, very well detailed, very refined. We have to change that narrative. Then, apart from that, there is a building being done on Zakir Hussain Marg, which is a judicial annex convention center for the Delhi High Court. And that is a more modern composition, though using the same material palette. And we're also implementing a campus connectivity at 6-meter level. So this entire High Court campus has 15 buildings which have come up over the last 45 years. And while they are between 5 floors to 8 floors high, they're not interconnected. So one has to climb down, walk, climb up, and that reduces the efficiency. So we've come up with a skywalk system which is going to connect all these buildings. And it's being done using steel and glass and stone pillars and escalators and glass lifts. And the whole idea is to make it very convenient for horizontal movement within the campus. So that is something that we're doing. And affordable housing is taking a lot of time. And we're also trying to ensure that while it's affordable, it's not poorly designed or poorly detailed. There's a lot of technology play involved. And so that's also an area where we'll be doing some meaningful work.
So when is the Central Vista project, Commerce Department, the Commerce Building?
It's not part of the main Central Vista project. It just sits on the Rajpath, which is also called the Central Vista. The Department of Commerce building should be functional, I think, by middle of next year. It should be ready by the middle of next year.
So the construction is already going on, started?
Yeah. The facade is up and all the 128 pillars have been finished. And it's a very, very beautifully executed project.
What is your opinion on architecture and design education in India? If you would like to comment on this.
See, since India is where I received my education, my view on this may be a little limited compared to somebody who's had the privilege of studying in India and outside. But having said that, I feel that when it comes to delivering the foundation in terms of the technical knowledge and the skills, our schools are doing a pretty good job. But when it comes to imparting design thinking skills, when it comes to exposure, which can only come through reading, traveling, conversations on design, when we look at the ability to genuinely solve problems, when we look at commentary and design conversations on compositions, on textures, on materials, I think there is a great deal to be done there. Also, I feel there is no hands-on approach to design. It tends to be a little more theoretical. So a doctor is expected to intern and within 3 to 6 months start treating patients. An architect very rarely is of much value after receiving 5 years of education. He's mostly capable of producing renders, and even something as simple as a staircase drawing, one has to sort of teach most students. So that aspect is missing. But I would imagine those are things still which the profession is able to teach. So even if there is a gap, but design thinking, the ability to articulate on design and make conversations on design, that is something that we really need to build in our education system. And I find even the quality of teachers, much is needed to be done in their ability to articulate and speak on design. Unless we are able to articulate our thoughts, we cannot teach, and we cannot cleanse our thoughts and evaluate our thoughts. So it is not just a medium of drawing. Eventually, great design happens here, and you need to be able to think clearly. So while in the last decade I find computer skills have greatly improved and it helps, the ability to think has not really transformed at all.
If not an architect, what would you be?
Actually, I would be anything that God would ask me to be. And clearly, I like to do happy, transformational stuff. I can't imagine myself, for instance, being a dentist. While it's a very noble profession, I find in the end of the day, all you're doing is peeping into people's faces. I can't imagine myself being a banker, but I can imagine myself being an investor, an entrepreneur. I can imagine myself being a writer. I'm enjoying that a lot nowadays. And I can imagine myself being a professor. I really enjoy teaching. Fundamentally, I enjoy transforming. For me, that is the turn on, to actually be able to impact in some way. And beyond the physical one-to-one transformation at a much sort of wider canvas. And I can imagine myself being a politician. Those are the things that I can imagine myself.
That's good. That's a good one. Politicians, of course, we need good politicians who want to transform India for good. So yes, we still have scope for that. We have in the future, maybe.
Hmm.
So who or what are you inspired by?
Oh, that's a beautiful question. I think early in my life, I was inspired by some of my dad's bosses and my dad. And I think between him and some of his bosses, they left an impression in terms of the integrity. It's something that runs very strongly in our family. And later, when I went to study at IIT, I would read a lot of biographies and autobiographies. Those are the only books that interested me. So Gandhi has really, really inspired me through life, and his ability to distillate and really focus and come up with brilliant solutions. I mean, to me, Gandhiji is not just about simplicity, not just about truth. Yes, he is about truth, he is about integrity, but he to me he represents the ability to come up with practical solutions which can really inspire communities into action. And then Jamshedji Tata, his biography Beyond the Last Blue Mountain, that really inspired how somebody can do so much for nation building. You know, the first cloth mill, the first power plant, the first steel plant, the first institute, Indian Institute of Science, which his children set up after he passed away, but he left money behind for that. So, such a great man that his ability to actually impact the nation and its people. So, I was really inspired by him. And among architects, I really love Stein's work. I think he has produced such human architecture that it actually thrives. If you spend time in Delhi and see his buildings, even 50 years after they were designed and built, they continue to thrive and people continue to admire them and use them and want to be there. So I'm really inspired by these and many more. But to me, the critical thing is people who have integrity, people who've been pioneers, and people who have wanted to do something for the community and the nation. Those are the things that inspire.
So I want to close with the last comment from you, and that would be for Services Reporter Magazine. Your message for us.
I think it's a great platform to get to know about all that is happening in the industry. And I'm really pleased to see that now digital platform is being used so powerfully, because I think everybody wants to consume videos now. Very few people want to read, and it's available on your mobile phone. So my message would be focus more on your video content, and also focus on the people who actually do the crafts, and let's break the language barrier also, and get the lesser acknowledged people in our industry also be represented on your platform. And of course, you people are already doing appreciable job of chronicling all the products and professionals in the industry.
If you know an architect, interior designer, or a product designer who is doing some outstanding work, projects, or an initiative which should be covered, and we should make him or her a part of Services Reporter's Architect Designer of the Week and bring this story to you, then write to us at press@servicesreporter.com. Goodbye for now, till we meet next week with another personality, another person of substance in the Architect Designer of the Week at Services Reporter.